Today I am going to discuss another very important small intestinal parasite which is called Ankylostoma duodenale or hookworm. It is so called because if you look at this parasite, its anterior end is bent like a hook, and that is why we call it hookworm. Now, the question that you can get in your exam or the case report related to this parasite is a child from a village presenting with fever, malnourishment, there is marked pallor, she has protruding abdomen, there is cough and wheeze. X-ray abdomen shows a suspicion or reveals suspicion of worms. Similarly, X-ray lungs shows lobar pneumonia. Stool examination of the child shows no mucus pus cells or RBCs, but it has definite, well defined eggs with 4 blastomeres or with 8 blastomeres. The occult blood, which is hidden blood in stool, was also positive, and blood examination of the child revealed iron deficiency anemia, which is also known as microcytic hypochromic anemia. Now, the questions related to this scenario or your learning objectives are that at the end of this session, all of you should be able to name the organism which is responsible for pneumonia and iron deficiency anemia. You should be able to identify the modes of transmissions of this parasite. You should be familiar with the reasons why it causes iron deficiency anemia, what is its pathogenesis. You should know the life cycle, and the most important is the lab diagnosis, which all of you should be familiar with. Coming to the species of this pathogen, in humans there are two species, Ankylostoma duodenale and Nectar americanum. Now it is very difficult to differentiate between the two. Both are responsible for iron deficiency anemia, and about 20 to 25% of the world population are affected by this parasite. Similarly, two animal pathogens are important. One is Ankylostoma brasilensis and the second is Ankylostoma caninum. And these two pathogens, they are known as the dog hookworm, and they are passed in the feces of dogs. And all those people who have dogs at home and are eating from the plates of these dogs or are on intimately involved with the dogs, they are the ones which are going to get infected by this hookworm, the dog hookworm. This slide is showing you the structure of the adult female. If you look at it, the anterior end is dorsally bent, and when it is freshly passed, blood can be seen beneath the cuticle or the skin of this parasite. Uh, it has a well defined digestive system starting from the mouth, which has a buccal capsule, and it has 5 glands in the esophageal region. And one of these esophageal gland is going to secrete the anticoagulant, which is going to keep the site where it is attached bleeding, and that is why it is going to result in iron deficiency anemia. If you look at this part of the slide, you can see that the female is larger than the male, and the posterior end is pointed. Coming to the buccal capsule, which is in the mouth, it has 6 teeth by means of which it is going to get attached to the intestinal mucosa, and there are 4 are on the ventral surface and 2 knob-likes are on the dorsal surface. Difference between Ankylostoma duodenale and the Nectar americanus. I told you that it's very difficult. One is the size. Ankylostoma duodenale is much larger than Nectar americanus. And then the major difference is in the buccal capsule, which in case of Ankylostoma duodenale is elongated and has teeth, 6 teeth on it, whereas Nectar americanum, it is spherical and it has cutting plates and there are no teeth. Now, the most important part, the eggs or the ova, when they are freshly passed, if you look at this slide, when they are freshly passed, just they have 4 or 8 blastomeres in them. The shell is very thin, and this is a colorless egg. And this colorless egg is passed in the feces. It further develops into the soil, and in the soil it develops this. The blastomeres are converted into this reptidiform larvae. Now, the reptidiform larvae containing embryotid eggs are not infected to man. Please, these eggs are not infected to man. In the soil, further developments occur. The shell breaks down, and this reptidiform larvae comes out. This is the immature form of the larva. This further grows in the soil and is converted into filariform larvae. And this filariform larvae is infective to man, and it constitutes one of your MCQs. There's just one host, man. Man is the definitive host, and there are no intermediate hosts required with this parasite. The mode of transmission is very important, and it is associated with basically poor sanitation and hygiene. In the villages, generally people go out in the fields to defecate, and they pass out the eggs of ankylostoma there in the fields. Similarly, when fecal fertilizers are used and these are contaminated with the eggs of ankylostoma, they are going to contaminate the soil. Hookworm is acquired. This infective filariform larvae is acquired when it penetrates the skin of people who are walking barefooted on the infected grounds. This filariform larvae is going to penetrate between the thin skin of the toes or the dorsum of the foot. And similarly, in case of gardeners and farmers who are working in the field with their hands, they can enter through the skin of the hands. So, the infected form is the infective filariform larvae, and it is going to enter. It is not taken with food or water, it is going to enter through the skin. In people who are walking barefooted, especially in the villages, on infected ground, and through the skin of the hands of gardeners and farmers. Once it has entered, it is going to produce its typical life cycle. So, this is the life cycle of a hookworm, and if you look at it, it is quite similar to what we did or what we discussed with Ascaris, with the exception that with Ascaris, the eggs are ingested with food and water, but in this case, the larva is going to enter the body. Now, the eggs which are passed with the first stage is passage of eggs in the feces, and these eggs contain 4 blastomeres or it contains 8 blastomeres. When it enters, when it passes out of the feces, it goes into the soil where it further develops. The reptidiform larvae are converted into filariform larvae, and it is the filariform larvae which are going to penetrate the skin. It is going to enter either through the feet or through the hands, depending on which site is being used on the infected soil. And these larvae penetrate the skin, it goes into the subcutaneous tissue, enters the circulation, and via the circulation, they are carried to the lungs. In the lungs, they break through the pulmonary capillaries, go into the alveolar spaces where they are going to further grow in size, and they are going to produce cough in the patient. And with this cough, the larvae are taken up in the throat again, and they are swallowed, go into the intestine where they develop into adult worm, and the female then starts laying its eggs, and the cycle is repeated again. So when you are asked in your exams to describe the life cycle, then you have to give the life cycle in detail as I've given here. As I said just now, man is the only host, and there are no intermediate hosts. Now, stage 1 is passage of segmented eggs. As you can see over here, it's a egg with 4 blastomeres, or they could be eggs with 8 blastomeres. These eggs are passed in feces, and stage 2 is development in soil. In the soil, the blastomeres are converted into reptidiform larvae. The egg shell breaks down, and this larva is released in the soil, where there's going to be further development of this larva, and this results in formation of a filariform larvae. And the filariform larvae are the infective form of this parasite. Then we come to the next stage, where This filariform larvae is going to penetrate through the skin of the people who are walking barefooted or who are working with their hands in the fields or on the ground which is contaminated with these larvae. And they, from there they enter the subcutaneous tissue. From the subcutaneous tissue, they are taken into the circulation, go to the right side of the heart, just like as we did with the Ascaris. They go to the lung and finally settle down in the alveolar spaces where they're going to grow bigger in size, and it is going to bring about an allergic reaction. There is excessive cough, as a result of which there's this lava are with the cough, they come into the throat and they are swallowed. After being swallowed, they go and again settle down into the small intestine. Now this is next comes stage 5, where they start developing into adult form. The male fertilizes the female and the female then starts laying eggs, and this cycle is repeated again. So again, with this, there are 5, so the life cycle of Ankylosoma duodenale, there are again 5 steps which you have to, which you need to remember, and if you remember the steps, you will be able to give the life cycle. This is another picture just like that, the one I showed you with the Ascaris. The eggs are passed. You can see this is uh, here you can see the first are the blastomeres, eggs containing blastomeres, which are finally converted into reptiliform larvae that hatches out from the egg, and this is converted into filariform larvae. The filariform larvae is going to penetrate the skin, and then it is going to enter the circulation, go into the lungs, trachea, pharynx. It is swallowed again, gets attached to the goes to the small intestines, get attached to the intestinal mucosa, develop into adult worms, and the female then again start laying eggs, as you can see over here. And so the half the cycle is in man, and the development of the egg is in the soil. The next important part of this topic is pathogenicity or disease produced by Ankylostomata duodenale. So the lesions are produced by the migrating larvae, and that is ground itch. And the second lesion is pulmonary lesions, because when it is present in the lung, it is going to produce pulmonary lesions. When it enters human being, it is going to produce ground itch or ankylostoma dermatitis. Then we have lesions produced by adult worm. Very important. Number one is anemia, that is iron deficiency anemia, or the other name for which is microcytic hyperchromic anemia. And second, the dog tapeworm are going to produce creeping eruption or cutaneous lava migraine in human beings. This slide is showing you ground itch. Now, the size from where this lava penetrate the skin, there is localized dermatitis and there is intense itching over here. So there is allergic itching at the sites, and you can see the patient has been scratching, and you can see the lesions which are produced over here. And this is known as ground itch. From the ground, the lava is entering the skin, and wherever it enters, it is going to produce localized allergic reaction. Lung lesions are also very important. Now, the lung lesions are when this parasite is there in the lungs, it goes to the lung through the pulmonary capillaries, and from the pulmonary capillaries, they go and settle down in the alveolar spaces. And this is the time when it produces allergic reaction in form of bronchitis or bronchopneumonia. When it grows in the lung in the alveolar spaces, as with I told you with the Ascaris, it is going to shed its outer coat, which is known as a cuticle, and produces hormones. They are responsible for local hypersensitivity reaction, which mimics a pneumonia. So the patient is going to present with fever. There is going to be chest pain on breathing. There is going to be this sputum with blood in it, blood streaks. A sputum would be there, or all the signs and symptoms of pneumonia will be there in this patient. Coming to the lesions which are produced by adult worm, and I said this part is very important because this parasite is going to produce iron deficiency anemia, and you are asked about it in your exams. How is this anemia caused? And why is this organism causing anemia? Now, this organism, I've told you, has either teeth in it or it has sucking plates, by means of which they get attached to the intestinal mucosa. As you can see here, they are attached to the intestinal mucosa by means of their cutting plates or by means of their teeth. And a single parasite is capable of sucking as much as 0.1 to zero point 0.3 mils of blood per day, and if there are 12 worms present in the body, they are capable of removing 1% hemoglobin from that patient. So this parasite is a habitual bloodsucker. Whenever it gets attached to the intestinal mucosa, it starts sucking blood. And number one, because it is habitual bloodsucker, and secondly, because this worm, when it leaves one side and goes and gets attached to the other side, it is going to leave small bleeding lesions behind. And why are these bleeding lesions left behind? Because this parasite, I told you with my first slide, that this is going to produce an anticoagulant. It has glands which produces anticoagulant, and this anticoagulant is responsible for the persistent bleeding which is seen at the sites where they leave or when they get attached to the intestinal mucosa. So there are two reasons for iron deficiency anemia. Number one is because it is a habitual bloodsucker and it is sucking a large amount of blood per day, and secondly, it is leaving behind bleeding lesions which are going to again result in chronic blood loss, and that is the reason why we get this iron deficiency anemia or microcytic hypochromic anemias. Coming to creeping eruption, the second name for creeping eruption is cutaneous lava migraines. Now, this condition is seen only when non-human falciform larvae or the dog tapeworm enters human being, and these are Braziliensis or canina. And they can, when they penetrate the human skin, they, as you can see in these pictures, they remain confined to the epidermis. They do not go deeper down. They are just behind and beneath the epidermis, and they move very slowly, about 1 to 2 centimeters per day, and it's a self-limited disease where this parasite is going to die within 4 to 8 weeks. So humans are considered as accidental and dead-end hosts, because further development of its life cycle is not going to occur in humans. They do enter the humans, but they accidentally enter humans and they are going to die here. The common sites for its entry are: number one, just like with human ankylostoma, they enter through the feet, spaces between the toes. From hands, they can enter via the knees if the person is sitting on the knees or on the buttocks. Now, once they enter, they at once start moving. You can see here this, it has entered through the spaces between the toe, and here you can see present in the hand. So when it enters, it at once start moving, but it's very slow movement, but it starts moving beneath the epidermis. And as it moves, it is going to produce these snake-like tracks or loops, and they are raised. You can see that they are raised. Here you can see raised tracks, and they produce intense itching. Here again you can see the red raised tracks which they are going to give intense itching, but it remains just beneath the epidermis. The larva is eventually going to die within a few weeks, and if you take a biopsy specimen from this site, it will show larva and a large number of eosinophils. So this is creeping eruption or cutaneous lava migraines. You're asked about it in your exams. You get MCQ on this portion. Clinical manifestation, as I've been telling you, they are important because the scenario is based on these clinical features. Patient is going to present with dyspepsia, there is epigastric tenderness, there may be constipation, perverted taste, or there may be pallor, puffy face, edema of the feet and ankles, which are signs and symptoms of anemia, protuberant stomach, or dry lustreless hair could be there. Coming to the lab diagnosis, which constitutes a very important part of your examination question. Just as with Ascaris, there could be direct evidence or there could be indirect evidence. Direct evidence means that you're going to look for the eggs and for the adult worm in the feces, and you're going to identify them microscopically. Now, if you make a slide of the stool, you're going to see these 4 or 8 blastomeres containing egg which has a thin shell around it, and it is not bile stain. Similarly, in the adult worm can also be demonstrated in the stool. Typical worms with anterior end is bent like a hook and the posterior end is straight. Indirect evidence means that you're going to use other means for confirmation of the diagnosis. Stool examination, because it is a habitual, it's going to produce suck blood, and it's a habitual sucker, plus it's lead to chronic blood loss. So there's going to be occult blood. Occult means hidden blood. So this stool will be positive for occult blood, and when you perform a blood examination on the patient will present with microcytic hypochromic anemia. There's going to be eosinophilia, and the number of reticulocytes will be markedly increased. Coming to the summary, we have done with this organism, Ankylostoma duodenale or hookworm. So at the end of the session, all of you must be familiar with the morphology of eggs. I've told you that it has 4 or 8 blastomeres, and it has a thin wall or a thin shell, and for the when it is freshly passed, it is like this, and later on it is going to these blastomeres are converted into reptidiform larvae, which comes out of the eggshell, and further development occurs in the soil, where it is converted into the phyllidiform larvae, that is the infected form of this worm. According to and then we discussed the life cycle, and told you that there are 5 stages. First is passage of segmented eggs. Second is entrance into the new host by people who are working barefooted on the infected soil. Then it migrates and localizes, it passes through the subcutaneous tissue via the circulation and right side of the heart, and finally goes and settles down in the alveolar spaces of the lung. And stage 5 is maturation, where they are going to come out from the lung, and they are swallowed again, settle down into the small intestine, get attached to the intestinal mucosa by their teeth, develop into adult form, and the female starts laying egg. Clinical conditions we have discussed in detail are related to the larval form and to the adult form. The larval form is going to produce groundage and pulmonary lesions, whereas the adult form is going to produce iron deficiency anemia. And if it is dog tapeworm which accidentally enters human being, then there is going to be creeping eruption. Lab diagnosis, direct and indirect evidence. Direct means that you're going to look for directly for the evidence of presence of eggs or the adult worm in the feces, and indirect is that you're going to perform the blood examination to see the type of anemia it is producing, of whether there is eosinophilia or not, and whether there is reticulocytosis or not. So the assignment for today is an MCQ and two MCQs probably, or 3 MCQs, and there's an SCQ, and you have to give the answer within 24 hours. And again, I'm telling you that the answers have to be handwritten. So this is the SEQ, a 5 years old boy from slum area presenting with marked anemia, edema of the hand and feet, and the examiner has also given the diagnosis, which is Ankylostoma duodenale. So the examiner wants you to draw and label the life cycle, and list the larval and adult form of this parasite, give the causes of anemia caused by this parasite, and its lab diagnosis. Then the MCQ is which is stage is infective form of Ankylostoma duodenale. So you tell us the infective stage. Red itchy tracks on the foot of a person who is coming home from sandy beach presents with the cutaneous larva migrans. So which parasite is going to produce this? Ankylostoma duodenale enters human body by which site? So these are 3 very important MCQs. Please read the MCQs properly, go through all the options, and then give your answer. Thank you.